Hi folks, Joseph Kursky here with you. In the last video, we talked about how to sign into the University of Minnesota's ArcGIS Online organizational account. And that is right here. Once you've signed in using the procedures I identified in that video, you will be here. I'm right now at the home page, so I've clicked on home and notice that it's umn.maps.arcgis.com. ArcGIS is the system that we're using, and the instance of the system, the component of the system, is called ArcGIS Online. More about that in a moment. So ArcGIS Online at the University of Minnesota. Okay, what can we do from here? Well, home is the front page where you've got some things that you can see and do there. Instructions for signing in, the story map curriculum portal, what makes the University of Minnesota a spatial place, and the USpatial folks there that support geospatial technology and applications there at the university, and some other things that you can discover. There's also a gallery. So if you want to browse to see what kinds of things that people have created at the University of Minnesota that may have been shared with you as a member of that organization, it's a nice way of sort of exploring what's going on with some of the projects that are map-based and GIS-based. As you can see, it's everywhere from historical freeways in Minneapolis to farming to ethnicity, race, history, lots more, archaeology, climate, energy, water, lots of topics, because they're all spatial. And so they have a place here at the University of Minnesota's ArcGIS Online organizational home. So you can actually go through and look at some of these things and open them up and take a look at them. That might spark some ideas for some things that you can do with geospatial technologies. There's also content. Over here in the top bar, there's content. This is content that others have created at the university. It's also content that you've created or will create at the university. So the first place it goes to is my content. So in my case, I've got some things that I've shared with the organization, which is this button right here. I've shared this with the organization. This CSV I haven't shared with anyone, so it just says owner. This one at the bottom here, freshwater invasive species, I've shared that with the public. So people outside of the University of Minnesota can actually look at that. So we'll talk about in the course when to share, when not to share, etc. Most of the time in this course, you'll be just sharing with the organization, just people at the University of Minnesota. And specifically, you'll really be sharing just so our classmates could look at your content and me as your instructor. So that's a little bit about sharing and who to share with, a little bit about content. Notice that here, this first item is a web map. It's a web map. We'll talk about what a web map is in the course, but it's just a web map it's a map that lives in ArcGIS Online. It lives online, it can be shared, and it's got anywhere from one to many layers inside that web map. You can interact with it, zoom and pan, do some measurements and other things on it, change the base map and other things we'll talk about in the next video. Here's a feature layer. So it's a layer inside of, that could be inside of a web map. A CSV is a comma separated value. It's a table of data. Typically it's got latitude, longitude, or street addresses, or some sort of place identification so you can actually map it. Here's another feature layer about the litter activity we'll go through in the course, another comma separated value table, and then another web map, in this case on freshwater species. So that's a little bit about what my content is. Notice that there are content items in your organization. So if you click on your organization, you'll see content items there. That could be feature layers, that could be maps, it could be web mapping applications like story maps or dashboards. There's a whole wide variety of things that people in the organization have created. So feel free to browse around in my organization as well. Also, if I go to one of these, note, and I'm signed in, notice in the upper right, I'm signed in as Joseph Kursky at the University of Minnesota. If I want to favorite one of these things, I can do that as well. So how do I do that? I can click on this star here and I can add that to my favorites. If I do that, then I will have it in this zone. I don't have any items yet in that zone, so let me go back to the organization, click on this favorites, and now if I go to favorites, I'm going to have that one. That's an easy way for you to find content, sort of like favorites on your own device, where you can just zero in on those things. It's a smaller subset of the larger content. So I can unfavorite this then, and if I go to favorites now, if I click off of that and go to favorites, I have no favorites again. So it's a nice way of pulling content from your organization, things that you've created or others have created, and put it into this smaller subset so you can more easily find it. There's also groups. Occasionally we might use some groups inside of the ArcGIS Online organization. Groups are sort of like Facebook groups where you've got a smaller subset of people in those groups to do certain things. Maybe it's mapping the litter in a community or tree species, or looking at community gardens, or looking at global climate. It could be a group focused on just those topics. And also the Living Atlas of the World. We'll talk more about that in the course, but the Living Atlas of the World has content items from NOAA, from NASA, from the University of Minnesota, from the Minnesota DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, from the U.S. Geological Survey, and other places that have hosted content in this Living Atlas. Okay, so that's a little bit of the wider community's work in here. Let's go back to My Content. Inside My Content, on the left side here, you've got folders. For example, I've got a survey here that you're actually going to take in the course, introduction to the course, and what your interests are in taking the course and beyond the course itself. So there's some items related to the survey that I set up, and also a dashboard and a story map in there. You've got folders that you can use to manage content. GIS requires you to be organized about your content. As you can see here, there's maps, there's layers, there's web mapping applications, there's surveys, there's other things. So be organized about your content. Don't just put it all in the default folder. It's, especially if you work in GIS for a while, you're going to save time, anguish, and hours by being organized about your content. That's a key skill in being successful with geospatial technology, and I would argue with any other technology as well, is to be organized about your content. So that's a little bit about ArcGIS Online and the University of Minnesota's instance of it. You can see at the top there's a bar that says Home, Gallery, Map, Scene. That's 3D scenes. Notebook, we'll talk about that a little bit in the course. That's a way for you to actually do some coding, Python coding and JavaScript coding inside a Jupyter notebook. Groups, we've chatted about that. Content and your organization, all at the top bar there. And there's also this blue bar, which has to do with your University of Minnesota content itself. You can also filter these if you're looking for, I just want to look at 3D scenes. I'm going to look at 3D scenes. I actually have none in this organization at the moment, but if I want to look at layers, I can say, oh, I just want to look at all the feature layers, and I can see all the feature layers. So you can filter the types of content as well, since there's lots of different kinds of content here. But that's a brief tour of the University of Minnesota's ArcGIS Online instance. Now, why does this matter beyond the University of Minnesota and beyond this course? Because you're probably going to be using some sort of web-based GIS, and it's going to have a content zone like this. If you're using ArcGIS Online in another organization, a city or a county government or a nonprofit or a private company that you might be working for someday, they'll probably have an ArcGIS Online organizational account that you log into and that you manage your content in, just like you're doing here at the University of Minnesota. So it's going to be very relevant and applicable going forward in your future career in business, transportation, wildlife biology, whatever it is you're interested in. So that is the University of Minnesota and ways to navigate around in the content area. Thanks.